I want to move on a little bit to strategic planning. Every board does strategic planning. All three up front facilitate strategic planning for OREA. Jack, I'm going to go to you and just your thoughts on maybe where it should be going. It seems to be going pretty well, or what?
Well, I'll say one thing to start off, and to full credit, I think every real estate board that I've dealt with in the province, and it's the majority, I can't remember the exact number over the last several years, but they're all engaged in planning. Typically, though, that planning horizon for most of you is a year. And I understand why. I think we all understand why. It coincides with terms of office of directors, certainly the term of office of president. For those of you that participated, though, this morning on the collaboration, the need for collaboration, and more large issues, as we heard today, require that degree of collaboration. These issues are not resolved in a year. And if we think about some of the examples in perhaps your generation, earlier generations, whether it was the vision of John F. Kennedy to send people to the moon and back, whether it was Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela on issues of civil and human rights, Terry Fox and his Marathon of Hope, all of those visions had to have others mobilized. They couldn't be achieved in a year. And I think we all need to recognize when we begin to engage in strategic planning in organized real estate that some of these issues do need thinking and do need work that is going to transcend those that are occupying board seats today. Indeed, perhaps even EOs. They're going to take 5 years. And how do we eat the elephant, right? We're going to do that one bite at a time, one step at a time. And it's not to leave those very important things that perhaps have a shorter term horizon aside, but begin to think strategically. And strategic planning, I think Bill said this very ably, it's not an event, it's a process. It requires a discipline, a strategic planning fitness, if you will, so that you keep coming back to it. It should be part of every board meeting as you think about how can we better serve our members not only today, but thinking ahead to what their needs might be 3 or 5 years from now. Think of the Amazon model. They know what you're doing. They can also predict what you're probably going to be doing. And we all, back to the data piece, need to be thinking that way and building that capability as well.
Yeah. That long-range thinking is key. I remember over 20 years ago, the retired EO of the Montreal Real Estate Board, Gérard Carignan, I was talking to him about strategic planning, and he said in his thick French-Canadian accent, he goes, Bill, he says, today we're planting the seeds of trees so our members can have shade in the future. And that really stuck with me, that you are planting seeds now. You may not even be on your board of directors when that goal is accomplished, but you will know that you had something to do with it, and it will be great. All right.
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah, please jump.
I mean, the thing that I'm also seeing, and I echo exactly what Jack is saying, is the planning horizon for a director, a board director, needs to be 3 to 5 years. I mean, you've hired a highly skilled, capable executive officer to manage the current business, to manage the business within the current year. To have another 12 or 14 people sit around the table and co-manage that annual plan is a waste of everybody's resource, and I think there's a handful of EOs in here who would tell you that that's a very frustrating process to live within. What you want as directors is to elevate yourself to that futuristic standpoint, and there's some things, some tools, some techniques that help you get there. Clearly, the introduction of some rigor to the process alone, having standards for planning. The introduction, I've seen most of the boards that I've worked with in this room have adopted a version of a balanced scorecard philosophy anyway, to the way that you look at the dimensions of the organization that you're accountable for planning, not just looking at the member side, because the member side is obviously why you exist, but you're the director of a corporation, and there's a lot more going on in an association simply than member services. So making sure that you're addressing all those priorities and setting some aspirational goals, and then more importantly than just setting aspirational goals, determining what are going to be the measures of success, what are the outcomes that we're going to actually monitor and report on, so that we can prove over time, because a planning horizon of 3 to 5 years, some things will be done in the first year, some things may not even start till the third year. So how are we going to know we've been successful? What are those milestones going to look like? Holding our EOs and CEOs to account for delivering on those things, and then regrouping our board monitoring process so that we're not tracking activity month to month, but we're tracking outcomes on an annual basis as opposed to a shorter time frame.
I just want to jump in on that. I think one of our challenges with organizations who are looking at a strategic plan as being a year long is what I'm finding is usually there's not a business plan in there. And I think we need to distinguish between the strategic plan and the business plan. And what I'm finding is that a lot of association executives don't have a business plan. We'll do a strategic plan, whether it's for 1 year or 3 years or 5 years, but then there's no implementation plan to make it happen. So 3 years from now or 1 year from now, gosh, we look at those things and we never got them done.
Yeah. And I've got some practical examples. There are people in this room from within the province that have done an amazing job in the last 2 cycles of taking the board's high-level strategic plan and crystallizing that into operational plans and even further into unit plans or department plans, depending on how big the organizations are. So, I mean, that's where that relationship happens between the board of directors and the executive officer on behalf of staff. As boards, you know you have one employee. You don't direct the staff. That employee, if you give them clear long-term direction, you have to hold them account to delivering on the short-term results as well. So that balance between an operating plan or a business plan and a strategic plan that has a horizon, 2 key ingredients for success. And it also helps with director succession. As you bring in, and again, this is an issue maybe we'll talk about in terms of office at some point in time, but there's a really quick turn of people that go through association boards typically. And the next board of directors that will come in behind shouldn't have to start the process all over again. They should take on the strategic priorities and plan from the previous generation, fine-tune it if it needs to be, or validate it against new information. But what I was seeing for years and years is every time a new group of directors came on board, we started planning all over again. And the EOs ran around and they threw out those priorities and they created a new list of priorities. And it seemed like a real redundancy.